In the early morning of December 2003, two men walked calmly into a jewellery store in London's exclusive Mayfair district. They wore expensive suits and smiled like any other wealthy customer. The staff welcomed them warmly, not knowing these men were about to pull off one of the most daring robberies in British history. Within seconds, everything changed. The men pulled out sledgehammers hidden under their coats and smashed the display cases with incredible speed and precision. Diamonds, rings, and precious gems flew everywhere. In less than 60 seconds, they grabbed jewellery worth over £2 million and vanished into the crowded streets. By the time police arrived, the thieves were gone like ghosts, but this was just the beginning. This robbery was the work of a mysterious criminal network that would soon become legendary across the world. The police didn't know it yet, but they were dealing with something they had never seen before. A group so skilled, so organised, and so bold that they would eventually be called the greatest jewel thieves in history. The name came later. Investigators studying the robbery found something strange at one of the crime scenes. A thief had hidden a stolen diamond inside a jar of face cream, just like a famous scene from the classic Pink Panther movie. The connection was perfect. From that moment on, they were known as the Pink Panthers. But who were these criminals? Where did they come from? The answers would shock the world. Most of them came from the former Yugoslavia, a region torn apart by brutal wars in the 1990s. Many were former soldiers, athletes, and working-class people who had lost everything when their country collapsed. Some had been special forces, trained in tactics and weapons. Others were just desperate people looking for a way to survive in a broken world. The wars had taught them valuable skills. They learned discipline, teamwork, and how to stay calm under extreme pressure. They knew how to plan operations, escape dangerous situations, and work together like a military unit. When the wars ended, these skills had nowhere to go. The economy was destroyed, jobs were impossible to find, families were struggling to eat. That's when some of them discovered a new opportunity. Western Europe was filled with jewellery stores carrying millions of dollars in diamonds and gems. The security was often weak, the police were slow, and if you were smart and fast enough, you could steal a fortune in minutes. The first successful heists were small and simple. A few men would rob a store, sell the jewels on the black market, and split the money. But as they succeeded, they became more ambitious. They started recruiting more people, planning bigger jobs, and targeting more expensive stores. Word spread through networks of criminals across Eastern Europe. If you were tough, smart, and willing to take risks, the Pink Panthers wanted you. What made them different from other criminals was their approach. They didn't just rob stores randomly. They studied their targets for weeks or even months. They learned the security systems, the staff schedules, the layout of every room. They timed police response times down to the second. Nothing was left to chance. They also used surprising tactics. Sometimes they dressed as wealthy customers or delivery workers to scout locations. Other times they created massive distractions like setting cars on fire outside to pull security away. They were creative, unpredictable, and always one step ahead. By 2005, the Pink Panthers had committed dozens of robberies across Europe. London, Paris, Monaco, Geneva, Dubai. No city felt safe. The total value of stolen jewels was climbing into the tens of millions. Police agencies from different countries started sharing information, slowly realizing they were all chasing the same group. But catching them was nearly impossible. The Panthers used fake identities, multiple passports, and constantly changed their appearance. They moved between countries easily, striking in one place and disappearing to another before anyone could react. They spoke multiple languages and blended into different cultures perfectly. The world was starting to pay attention. News reports called them the most successful criminal gang in modern history. Interpol created a special task force just to track them. But even with international cooperation, the Pink Panthers seemed unstoppable. Every time police thought they were close, the gang would strike again somewhere new, proving they were always ahead of the game. This was just the beginning of their incredible story, a story of crime, adventure, and the hunt for the most elusive thieves the world had ever seen. The Pink Panthers didn't just rob jewellery stores, they turned robbery into an art form. Each heist was like watching a perfectly choreographed performance, executed with military precision and surprising creativity that left police stunned and confused. Their most famous technique was the smash and grab method, but calling it simple would be completely wrong. What looked like chaos from the outside was actually the result of weeks of careful planning and practice. Every member knew exactly what to do, where to stand, and how long they had before police arrived. A typical Pink Panther robbery followed a pattern that became their signature. First, a small team would enter the store posing as normal customers. They studied the layout, counted the staff, identified the most valuable pieces, and noted where security cameras were positioned. They were so convincing that employees never suspected anything unusual. On the day of the robbery, timing was everything. They chose moments when streets were crowded so they could disappear into the masses afterward. Sometimes they struck during lunch hours when staff were distracted. Other times they waited for special events when stores displayed their most expensive collections. The actual robbery usually lasted less than 3 minutes. The team would burst in with overwhelming force, using hammers or axes to smash display cases. The loud noise and sudden violence terrified everyone inside, making them too shocked to react. While some members grabbed jewels, others controlled the staff and customers, making sure nobody triggered alarms or called police. But the real genius was in the escape. The Panthers always had multiple getaway plans. Sometimes they used motorcycles that could weave through traffic and squeeze down narrow alleys where police cars couldn't follow. Other times they had cars waiting with false license plates and hidden compartments to hide the stolen goods. One of their most brilliant escapes happened in Dubai in 2007. After robbing a luxury jewellery store in a high-end mall, they didn't run away. Instead, they calmly walked to the parking garage, changed clothes in a bathroom, and drove away in an expensive car looking like wealthy tourists. Security footage showed them laughing and talking casually, while millions in stolen diamonds were hidden in their bags. They also used incredible distractions. In Saint-Tropez, France, they set several cars on fire in different parts of town just before robbing a jewellery store. The fires pulled police and emergency services away, giving the thieves extra time to escape. By the time authorities realised it was a diversion, the Panthers were long gone. Their creativity seemed endless. In one robbery, a thief drove a car directly through the front window of a jewellery store, grabbed what he could in seconds, and drove away through the broken glass. In another case, they used a speedboat to escape across a lake, knowing police cars couldn't follow them on water. What truly set them apart was their intelligence network. They had contacts everywhere. Corrupt security guards who gave them information about alarm systems, crooked jewellers who helped them sell stolen goods, and even people working in luxury hotels who identified wealthy targets wearing expensive jewellery. The Panthers also understood psychology. They knew that the first few minutes after a robbery were crucial. Witnesses were confused and scared, giving conflicting descriptions. Security footage often didn't capture clear images because everything happened so fast. By the time police pieced together what happened, the thieves had already left the country. They constantly adapted their methods too. When security companies installed better alarm systems, the Panthers found ways around them. When police started using helicopters to chase getaway cars, the Panthers switched to motorcycles or public transportation. They were always learning, always evolving. Money laundering was another area where they excelled. Stolen jewellery couldn't just be sold openly. The Panthers had connections with black market dealers across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. They would break down expensive pieces, remove stones from their settings, and sell them separately to avoid detection. Some estimates suggested they only received about 20% of the actual value of stolen goods, but that was still enough to make them incredibly wealthy. Between 2003 and 2008, the Pink Panthers were unstoppable. They hit targets in Japan, Monaco, Switzerland, Germany, and dozens of other countries. Each robbery was more daring than the last. Police files grew thicker with reports, witness statements, and security footage, but catching them seemed impossible. Interpol estimated the gang had over 200 members at its peak, operating in small independent cells. If one group got caught, the others continued working. This decentralized structure made them incredibly difficult to stop. There was no single leader to arrest, no headquarters to raid. The world watched in amazement and fear. Jewelry stores increased security, hired more guards, and installed sophisticated alarm systems. But somehow, the Pink Panthers always found a way in. They were ghosts who appeared suddenly, took what they wanted, and vanished without a trace. If there was one robbery that showed the world just how bold and skilled the Pink Panthers truly were, it was the Harry Winston heist in Monaco. This wasn't just another jewellery store. This was one of the most prestigious jewelers in the world, located in one of the wealthiest cities on Earth, with security that was supposed to be impossible to beat. Monaco is a tiny country on the French Riviera, famous for its casinos, luxury yachts, and billionaires. The police presence is heavy, with cameras everywhere and officers constantly patrolling. Criminals usually avoid Monaco because getting caught is almost guaranteed, but the Pink Panthers didn't think like normal criminals. On a quiet summer morning in July 2007, 4 people walked into the Harry Winston boutique in Monaco. 3 were men dressed in expensive suits and wearing wigs and makeup to disguise their real appearances. 1 was a woman, elegantly dressed like a wealthy customer. They looked completely normal, like the kind of people who regularly shop at stores where a single ring costs more than most people earn in a lifetime. The staff welcomed them warmly, offering champagne and displaying their finest pieces. The fake customers smiled, asked questions, and examined diamonds worth millions of dollars. Everything seemed perfectly normal. The employees had no idea they were about to experience one of the most shocking robberies in Monaco's history. Suddenly, the atmosphere changed. One of the men pulled out a handgun, another produced a bag. The third man moved quickly to control the staff while the woman blocked the entrance. In calm, professional voices, they told everyone to remain quiet and cooperate. No one would get hurt if everyone stayed calm. The robbery was shockingly fast and efficient. They knew exactly which display cases held the most valuable pieces. They grabbed diamond necklaces worth hundreds of thousands each, rare coloured diamonds, precious rings, and watches that cost more than luxury cars. Their movements were practiced and precise, like they had rehearsed every second. Within 3 minutes, they had filled their bags with jewellery worth over 10 million euros. Then, just as quickly as they appeared, they walked calmly out of the store. No running, no panic. They simply left like satisfied customers finishing a shopping trip. The escape was brilliant. Outside, they had motorcycles waiting with drivers ready to go. They jumped on and disappeared into Monaco's winding streets before police could even be alerted. By the time security footage was reviewed and officers started searching, the thieves were already across the border into France. But the Monaco job was even more impressive than it seemed. Investigators later discovered the thieves had been planning this robbery for months. They had visited the store multiple times, studying the layout, memorizing where the most valuable pieces were kept, and timing how long it took for police to respond to alarms in that area. They also chose their timing carefully. The robbery happened just after a major holiday, when the store had restocked with new expensive pieces for wealthy summer tourists. The Panthers knew the inventory would be at its highest value. What shocked security experts most was the level of inside information the thieves seemed to have. They knew which displays held real diamonds versus fake display copies. They ignored cheaper pieces and took only the most valuable items. This suggested they either had detailed knowledge of the store's inventory or had help from someone on the inside. The Monaco robbery sent shockwaves through the luxury jewellery world. If the Pink Panthers could rob a Harry Winston store in one of the most secure cities in Europe, no jewellery store anywhere was safe. Insurance companies raised their rates, security firms were hired to upgrade systems, armed guards became more common in high-end stores. But perhaps most impressive was what happened to the stolen jewels. Despite intense international investigation, police never recovered most of the stolen pieces. The Panthers had such efficient networks for breaking down and selling stolen jewellery that the diamonds were likely already out of Europe and being sold in different countries within days. The Monaco heist also revealed something important about how the Panthers operated. They weren't just smash-and-grab thieves. They were sophisticated criminals who could adapt to any environment. They could be violent and intimidating when needed, but they could also be smooth and professional. This versatility made them incredibly dangerous. Interpol intensified their investigation after Monaco. The robbery was too public, too embarrassing for authorities to ignore. A special task force was created with investigators from multiple countries working together. They analysed security footage frame by frame, interviewed witnesses, and tracked financial transactions looking for any clue that might lead them to the gang. But the Pink Panthers had already moved on. Within weeks of the Monaco robbery, they struck again in another country. Then another. It was like they were taunting law enforcement, proving that no matter how much attention they received, they were still untouchable. The Monaco job became legendary in criminal circles. Young thieves studied it, trying to understand how it was done. Security experts analysed it to improve their systems, and police investigators obsessed over it, looking for the tiny mistake that might help them catch the Panthers. For the members of the Pink Panthers who pulled off the Monaco heist, the reward was enormous. With their share of 10 million euros, they could live comfortably for years. Some probably retired from crime, bought homes and started legitimate businesses. Others stayed in the game, addicted to the thrill and the money, but Monaco was also a turning point. The robbery brought so much attention that staying hidden became harder. Police forces around the world were now actively hunting the Pink Panthers. The era of easy robberies was slowly coming to an end. What do you do after stealing millions of dollars in jewels? For many Pink Panthers members, the answer was simple. Live like the wealthy people they stole from. The money transformed their lives in ways they never imagined possible when they were struggling in war-torn Eastern Europe. For men and women who grew up in poverty, suddenly having access to enormous wealth was intoxicating. They bought luxury cars, Ferraris, Porsches, Mercedes-Benz models that turned heads wherever they went. They wore expensive designer clothes, stayed in five-star hotels and dined at restaurants where a single meal cost more than most people's monthly salary. Some bought beautiful apartments in cities like Paris, London and Barcelona. They travelled the world, visiting tropical beaches, skiing in the Alps and gambling in exclusive casinos. For people who had survived wars and economic collapse, this lifestyle felt like a dream they never wanted to end. But the money came with problems. Spending large amounts of cash without attracting attention was difficult. Banks report suspicious deposits. Tax authorities investigate people with expensive lifestyles but no obvious source of income. The Panthers had to be smart about how they used their wealth. Many created fake businesses to explain where their money came from. They opened restaurants, car dealerships, import-export companies, and other legitimate-looking operations that served as covers for their illegal income. On paper, they were successful entrepreneurs. In reality, these businesses were just ways to launder stolen money. Some members invested in real estate, buying properties in different countries under false names. Real estate was perfect for money laundering because property values fluctuate, making it easier to hide the source of funds. A Panther might buy an apartment in Montenegro, live in it for a year, then sell it and claim the profit came from the real estate market, not from stolen diamonds. The lifestyle also created tensions within the group. Some members were careful with their money, saving it and living modestly to avoid detection. Others couldn't resist flaunting their wealth, buying flashy cars and throwing expensive parties. This difference in attitude sometimes caused conflicts. Paranoia was another constant companion. Every Pink Panther knew that police across multiple countries were hunting them. They had to constantly watch for surveillance, avoid being photographed, and be careful about who they trusted. Former friends could become informants, lovers could betray them. Even family members might accidentally reveal information to authorities. Living under false identities was psychologically exhausting. Many Panthers used multiple passports and names, sometimes forgetting which identity they were using in which country. They couldn't celebrate birthdays openly or maintain long-term relationships easily because their entire existence was built on lies. Despite the risks, many couldn't quit. The money was too good. A normal job seemed impossible after experiencing such wealth. A former soldier who once earned a few $100s a month could now make more in one robbery than most people earn in a lifetime. The temptation to do just one more job was always there. Some Panthers used their money to help families back home. They sent cash to parents, siblings and children, buying them houses and paying for education. This generosity made them heroes in their communities, but it also created trails that police could follow. The constant travel required for their criminal work also took a toll. Panthers might rob a store in Tokyo on Monday, fly to Dubai on Wednesday, scout a target in Milan on Friday and be back in Belgrade by Sunday. This nomadic lifestyle prevented them from putting down roots or building stable lives. Relationships were complicated. Some Panthers married and tried to maintain normal family lives while secretly continuing their criminal careers. They told spouses they were traveling for business, hiding the truth about where the money really came from. The lies created stress and sometimes led to divorces when the truth eventually came out. Others embraced the single life, dating models and socialites they met in exclusive clubs. These relationships were usually shallow and temporary, based on money and excitement rather than genuine connection. The Panthers knew these people wouldn't stay around if the money disappeared. Addiction became a problem for some members. The combination of enormous wealth, constant stress, and lack of purpose led some to abuse drugs and alcohol. Cocaine was particularly common among criminals in the luxury circles they moved through. What started as occasional party use sometimes spiraled into serious addiction that affected their judgment and performance. The smartest Panthers eventually tried to exit the criminal life. They took their money, moved to countries where they weren't wanted by police, and started legitimate businesses. Some successfully transitioned to normal lives, using their intelligence and risk-taking abilities in legal ventures. But most found leaving impossible. The criminal network was like a spider web. Once you were in, extracting yourself was incredibly difficult. Other members knew your secrets and could expose you if you stopped cooperating. The police never stopped hunting you, even if you retired. And the memory of that incredible rush during a successful heist was addictive. The lifestyle also created a strange dual identity. By day, a Panther might be a loving father playing with his children in the park. By night, he was planning his next $1 million robbery. This psychological split was difficult to maintain long-term. Despite the dangers and stress, many Panthers looked back on these years as the best time of their lives. They had gone from nothing to everything. They had outsmarted police forces from dozens of countries. They had travelled the world and lived in luxury. For people who grew up in war zones and poverty, that was an achievement worth celebrating, even if the price was constant fear of arrest. While the Pink Panthers were living their luxurious lives, police forces around the world were slowly building a web to catch them. The investigation was massive, involving Interpol, FBI, Scotland Yard and police agencies from over 30 countries. They called it the largest international manhunt for a criminal organisation in modern history. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: security camera footage. Modern cameras captured incredible detail, and police had footage from dozens of robberies. Using sophisticated facial recognition technology, investigators started identifying patterns. The same faces appeared at different crimes in different countries. They also analysed the thieves' techniques, the way they moved, how they held their tools, even their body language revealed information. Investigators noticed that certain people always played specific roles. Some were the smashers who broke display cases, others were the grabbers who collected jewels, and still others controlled the crowds. One of the first major arrests happened in 2005, when French police caught a Panther member trying to cross the border from Monaco. He had stolen jewellery in his car and fake passports in different names. Under interrogation, he refused to talk, but his arrest gave investigators access to his phone, computer, and financial records. This information was like finding a crack in a dam. The data revealed contacts with other suspected gang members, travel patterns that matched robbery dates, and money transfers to jewellery dealers known for buying stolen goods. Each piece of information led to another, slowly exposing the network. The problem was that the Pink Panthers weren't organised like traditional criminal gangs. There was no clear leader to arrest that would bring down the entire operation. Instead, they worked in small independent cells that didn't always know about each other. Catching one group didn't stop the others from operating. Interpol created detailed profiles on suspected Panthers members. They tracked their movements using passport controls, hotel registrations, and surveillance cameras at airports. They developed a database with hundreds of names, photographs, and known associates. The net was tightening. In 2007, a major breakthrough came when Serbian police arrested several suspected Panthers in Belgrade. The raid recovered stolen jewellery, weapons, and documents, linking the suspects to multiple robberies across Europe. During the arrests, one member was injured trying to escape by jumping from a building, showing how desperate they were to avoid capture. The arrested men faced serious charges, but the Serbian legal system was slow and complicated. Some suspects had connections to powerful people who could influence the courts. Corruption was still a problem in post-war Serbia, and some Panthers managed to avoid serious punishment despite clear evidence against them. International cooperation improved as more countries shared information. French investigators worked with Swiss police, who coordinated with German authorities, who exchanged data with British detectives. This level of cooperation was unprecedented and started producing results. One effective tactic was watching jewellery stores in major cities. Police knew the Panthers would eventually strike again, so they increased surveillance on high-value targets. Undercover officers posed as customers, security guards, or maintenance workers, waiting for the Panthers to make their move. In 2008, a sting operation in Milan almost caught a Panther team during a robbery. And police had received a tip that a heist was being planned and set up surveillance. They watched as the suspects scouted the location, then waited for them to strike. But somehow the Panthers sensed something was wrong and called off the robbery at the last minute. The suspects disappeared before police could make arrests. This close call showed how careful and paranoid the Panthers had become. They could sense danger and were willing to abandon carefully planned robberies if anything felt wrong. Their survival instincts were highly developed. Technology became both a tool and a trap for the Panthers. Cell phones made communication easier, but they also created records that police could track. Credit cards were convenient for travel, but they left digital footprints. The modern world's surveillance infrastructure was slowly catching up to them. DNA evidence also became important. At some crime scenes, thieves left behind traces of blood from cuts suffered while breaking glass, or saliva from discarded cigarettes. Modern forensic techniques could identify individuals from these tiny samples, linking them to multiple crimes across different countries. Financial investigators tracked the money flow. They looked for unusual patterns in money transfers, real estate purchases, and luxury goods bought with cash. Anyone living beyond their apparent means attracted attention. Bank accounts were frozen, properties were seized, and financial pressure mounted on suspected gang members. Some Panthers were caught in humiliating ways. One was arrested at a luxury resort in Spain, drinking champagne by the pool when police surrounded him. Another was caught during a routine traffic stop when a sharp-eyed officer recognized him from wanted posters. The aura of invincibility was slowly crumbling. Informants also played a crucial role. Some arrested Panthers faced long prison sentences and chose to cooperate with police in exchange for reduced punishment. Others were driven by revenge after disputes within the gang. These informants provided insider information about planned robberies, gang members' real identities, and where stolen jewels were hidden. The media coverage intensified public pressure on authorities to catch the Panthers. News stories made them seem like glamorous criminals, which embarrassed police forces who couldn't stop them. Politicians demanded results, and police chiefs promised increased efforts to bring the gang down. By 2009, over 50 suspected Panthers members had been arrested in various countries. Some received serious prison sentences, while others managed to get lighter punishments or were released on technicalities. The legal battles were complex because evidence had to be shared across different legal systems with different rules. Despite these successes, the Pink Panthers continued operating. New members replaced those who were caught. Robberies still happened, though less frequently. The gang had become more cautious, choosing targets more carefully and taking longer breaks between jobs. The hunters and the hunted were locked in a deadly game that spanned the globe. Every arrest weakened the Panthers, but every successful robbery proved they were still dangerous. Being arrested was never the end for some Pink Panthers members. What happened next shocked the world and showed just how resourceful and determined these criminals really were. Some of the most dramatic moments in the Panthers' story involved incredible prison escapes that seemed impossible. The most famous escape happened in Switzerland in 2009. A Panther member named Poperick was serving time in a supposedly secure prison near Lausanne. He had been convicted of multiple jewellery robberies and was looking at many more years behind bars. But he wasn't planning to serve his full sentence. On a quiet May morning, guards heard a strange noise outside the prison. Before they could investigate, two armed men burst through the prison's entrance door. They had used explosives to blast it open. The men moved quickly and efficiently, exactly like during a jewellery heist. They knew exactly where Poperick was being held. They forced guards to open his cell, grabbed him, and headed for the roof. A helicopter appeared overhead, hovering just above the prison. Ropes were thrown down, and within minutes Poperick and his rescuers climbed aboard. The helicopter flew away before prison alarms could even fully activate. The escape was so swift and professional that guards barely had time to react. By the time police helicopters were scrambled to give chase, the getaway helicopter had already landed in a remote field. The escapees had switched to cars and disappeared. It was like something from an action movie, except it was completely real. Investigators later discovered the escape had been planned for months. The helicopter had been stolen days earlier from a helicopter rental company. The pilots who helped were either paid accomplices or other gang members. The entire operation showed the same military precision that made the Panthers successful at robberies. This wasn't an isolated incident. other Panthers pulled off similar escapes in different countries. In Greece, a Panther member escaped from a prison van by overpowering guards during transfer between facilities. He managed to flee despite being handcuffed, showing remarkable determination and strength. Another dramatic escape happened in France. A Panther being held in a Paris jail managed to smuggle in tools, possibly hidden inside food packages brought by visitors. He spent weeks quietly cutting through bars in his cell, working only at night when guards made fewer rounds. One morning, guards found his cell empty with a hole leading to a ventilation shaft. He had crawled through the prison's duct system and escaped through a roof access point. These escapes embarrassed authorities and raised serious questions about prison security. How could dangerous international criminals escape from supposedly secure facilities? Investigations revealed that corruption sometimes played a role. Guards were occasionally bribed to look the other way or accidentally leave doors unlocked. The escapes also demonstrated the strong loyalty within the Panthers' network. Members on the outside were willing to risk their own freedom to rescue arrested comrades. This brotherhood was partly cultural, coming from their shared backgrounds in war-torn Yugoslavia, where loyalty meant survival. Not all escape attempts succeeded. Some Panthers tried to break out but were caught before completing their plans. Others made it outside the prison walls but were recaptured within days. Living as a fugitive was difficult when your face was known to police across multiple countries. For those who successfully escaped, life became even more complicated. They couldn't use their real identities or return to their families. They lived in constant fear of recapture, moving frequently and trusting no one. Some fled to countries without extradition treaties with Europe, living in places like South America or Southeast Asia. The psychological toll of being a fugitive was enormous. Former Panthers who escaped described the constant paranoia, always looking over their shoulders, never sleeping soundly. Some eventually turned themselves in, deciding that life in prison was better than the stress of running forever. Authorities responded to the escapes by improving prison security. High-risk prisoners were moved to maximum security facilities with better surveillance and more guards. Visits were monitored more closely. Cell inspections became more frequent and thorough. International cooperation also improved. When a Panther escaped in one country, alerts went out immediately to border controls across Europe. Airports, train stations, and ports increased security. The net became harder to slip through. Despite these measures, the escapes became legendary. They enhanced the Panthers' reputation as almost superhuman criminals who couldn't be stopped even by prison walls. Young criminals looked up to them, seeing them as heroes who beat the system. The escapes also revealed something important about the Panthers' resources. Organising a helicopter prison break costs enormous amounts of money. It requires planning, equipment, and people willing to risk serious criminal charges. The fact that the Panthers could pull this off showed they still had significant funds and organisational capability. Some escapees were eventually recaptured. Years after their dramatic prison breaks, police would track them down in foreign countries and arrest them again. Others remained free, becoming almost mythical figures rumoured to be living under new identities in distant lands. The prison breaks were turning points in the Panthers' story. They showed that even when caught, these criminals refused to accept defeat. They were fighters who would use any means necessary to regain their freedom. This determination made them both fascinating and terrifying to law enforcement. But the escapes also had consequences. Each one triggered massive investigations, increased security, and more resources dedicated to hunting the Panthers. In trying to free their members, the gang actually made themselves bigger targets. By 2010, the Pink Panthers were still active, but the golden era was ending. The international pressure had become too intense. Too many members were in prison or on the run. The easy targets were now heavily guarded. The risks were getting higher while the rewards were shrinking. Several factors contributed to their decline. First, jewellery stores worldwide had drastically upgraded security. After losing millions to the Panthers, insurance companies demanded better protection. Stores installed reinforced glass that couldn't be easily smashed, alarm systems that connected directly to police stations, and security guards trained specifically to handle fast-moving robberies. Some luxury stores even hired former Special Forces soldiers as security personnel. These guards could recognize suspicious behavior and react quickly to threats. The element of surprise that the Panthers relied on was becoming harder to achieve. Second, the economic crisis of 2008 affected the jewellery market. Wealthy people were spending less on luxury items. Stores carried less inventory, meaning potential targets held less value. Some high-end jewellers closed entirely, reducing the number of viable targets. Third, police tactics improved dramatically. The massive international database of Panther members meant that authorities could track suspects across borders more effectively. Facial recognition software got better, making it harder for thieves to disguise themselves. Airport security increased, making international travel riskier for wanted criminals. The arrests also took a toll. By 2012, over 100 suspected Panthers members had been arrested in various countries. Some received sentences of 20 years or more. The prospect of spending decades in prison made the lifestyle less attractive to potential new recruits. Internal conflicts weakened the organisation too. Disputes over money, disagreements about tactics, and personal rivalries created fractures within the network. Some members suspected others of cooperating with police. Trust eroded, making it harder to organise complex operations. The older generation of Panthers started aging out. Men who were in their 30s during the early 2000s were now in their 40s and 50s. The physical demands of violent robberies and quick escapes became harder. Younger criminals interested in easier, less risky crimes like cybercrime or drug trafficking replaced them. Technology also changed the criminal landscape. Stealing jewellery required physical risk and elaborate planning. Meanwhile, hackers could steal millions from the comfort of their homes with far less chance of getting caught. The risk-reward calculation shifted away from traditional robberies. Several high-profile failures damaged the Panthers' reputation of invincibility. In 2013, a robbery in Cannes, France, went wrong when police arrived faster than expected. The thieves were forced to flee without completing the heist, leaving behind their equipment. It was a rare public failure that showed the Panthers were vulnerable. Another failed robbery in Dubai resulted in a shootout with police. One gang member was killed and others were captured. The violent confrontation showed that authorities were now willing to use lethal force to stop the Panthers, raising the stakes considerably. The media narrative also changed. Early coverage portrayed the Panthers as clever anti-heroes, like modern-day Robin Hoods. But as more details emerged about violence during robberies and the gang's connections to other serious crimes, public opinion shifted. They were no longer seen as charming rogues but as dangerous criminals who needed to be stopped. Some former Panthers gave interviews to journalists, revealing insider details about how the gang operated. These revelations helped police understand the organisation better, but also showed that the code of silence was breaking down. When criminals start talking publicly, it's usually a sign that the organisation is dying. Financial tracking became more sophisticated. The techniques Panthers used to launder money through shell companies and real estate became less effective as international financial regulations tightened. Banks started sharing information across borders, making it harder to hide illegal funds. The remaining active Panthers had to work harder for smaller rewards. A robbery that might have netted $5 million in 2005 might only bring in $1 million by 2015, after accounting for better security, less valuable inventory, and increased difficulty selling stolen goods. Some members tried to transition to other crimes. A few became involved in drug trafficking or human smuggling, using their international contacts and skills for different illegal activities. Others attempted to go legitimate, using their stolen money to start legal businesses. The romantic era of the Pink Panthers was fading. What had been an almost mythical criminal enterprise was becoming a cautionary tale. The message was clear. No matter how skilled or lucky you are, law enforcement will eventually catch up. By 2015, the Panthers were a shadow of their former glory. Small groups still operated occasionally, pulling off minor heists that barely made the news. But the days of spectacular multi-million-dollar robberies were largely over. The survivors faced difficult choices. Some remained in prison, serving long sentences and knowing they would be old men when released. Others lived as fugitives in foreign countries, unable to return home or see their families. A few had successfully disappeared, living quiet lives under false identities, always afraid of being discovered. The Pink Panthers' story was becoming history rather than current events. Police academies used their cases as teaching examples. Security companies studied their methods to develop better protection systems. And former gang members grew older, their glory days receding into memory. When the full story of the Pink Panthers is calculated, the numbers are staggering. Between 1999 and 2015, they committed over 340 robberies in 35 countries across 6 continents. The total value of stolen jewelry exceeded $500 million, making them the most successful jewel thieves in recorded history. But their legacy goes far beyond the money. The Pink Panthers changed how the world thinks about organized crime, security, and international law enforcement. They exposed weaknesses in systems that were supposed to be unbreakable and forced entire industries to rethink how they protect valuable assets. The jewelry industry was transformed by the Panthers' activities. Before their emergence, many luxury stores relied on basic security measures. Expensive jewelry sat in simple glass cases that could be smashed with a hammer. Staff were often untrained in handling robberies. The Panthers forced a complete revolution in security practices. Today, high-end jewelry stores look like small fortresses. They have bulletproof glass, silent alarms connected directly to police stations, time delay safes that can't be opened quickly even by staff, and sophisticated surveillance systems with backup power supplies. Many stores now limit the amount of valuable inventory displayed at any time, keeping most pieces locked in vaults until requested by verified customers. The insurance industry also changed dramatically. Companies that insure jewelry stores now require extensive security measures before providing coverage. Premiums increase substantially, making it more expensive to operate luxury jewelry businesses. Some insurers now refuse to cover stores in certain locations deemed too risky. Law enforcement learned valuable lessons from hunting the Panthers. The investigation pioneered new levels of international police cooperation. Before the Panthers, agencies from different countries often worked independently, sometimes competing rather than collaborating. The Panthers forced them to share information, coordinate operations, and trust each other. Interpol developed new systems for tracking international criminals because of the Panthers. Databases improved, allowing real-time sharing of information across borders. Facial recognition technology advanced, partly driven by the need to identify Panthers members from security footage. These tools now help catch all kinds of international criminals, not just jewel thieves. The legal system also evolved. Countries strengthened laws against organized crime and created new mechanisms for prosecuting criminals who operate across multiple jurisdictions. Extradition treaties were updated to make it easier to transfer suspects between countries for trial. But perhaps the most interesting legacy is cultural. The Pink Panthers captured public imagination in a way that few criminal groups do. Books were written about them, documentaries produced, and their story became part of modern folklore. They represented something that people found fascinating. Ordinary people from difficult backgrounds who beat the system, even if only temporarily. Their story raised uncomfortable questions about inequality and opportunity. Many Panthers came from regions destroyed by war and economic collapse. Would they have turned to crime if they had access to education, jobs, and hope for the future? Their success showed intelligence, discipline, and organizational skills that could have been used for legitimate purposes under different circumstances. Some former Panthers who served their prison time and were released tried to use their notoriety positively. A few gave lectures about security, helping jewelry stores understand criminal thinking and improve their defenses. Others wrote books or cooperated with documentary makers, telling their stories as cautionary tales. The impact on their home countries was complex. In Serbia, Montenegro, and other parts of the former Yugoslavia, the Panthers were sometimes viewed with mixed feelings. Some saw them as criminals who damaged their country's reputation. Others viewed them as survivors who did what they had to in impossible circumstances. The money the Panthers sent home helped some communities. Families bought houses, started businesses, and sent children to universities using funds from robberies. This created ethical dilemmas. Was it acceptable to benefit from stolen money if it improved lives in poor regions? For security professionals, the Panthers remain the ultimate challenge. Security conferences still feature sessions analysing Panther robberies, trying to understand how they succeeded and how similar attacks can be prevented. Their methods are studied like military tactics, with experts dissecting each operation to find lessons. The criminal underworld also learned from the Panthers. Other gangs tried to copy their methods, leading to increased jewelry store robberies worldwide in the 2000s. But most imitators lacked the discipline, planning, and skill that made the Panthers successful. Many were caught quickly, proving that the Panthers' success came from exceptional ability, not just luck. Today, some original Panthers members are still in prison, serving long sentences. A few live quietly in obscurity, their criminal past hidden. Others died during robberies, in prison, or from various causes related to their dangerous lifestyle. A small number are still wanted by police, living as fugitives somewhere in the world. The youngest victims of the Panthers story might be their own children. Some gang members had families who knew nothing about their criminal activities. When arrests came, children discovered their fathers were international criminals. This legacy of shame and trauma affected families for generations. For law enforcement, the case remains partially unsolved. Despite hundreds of arrests and extensive investigations, most of the stolen jewellery was never recovered. It was sold, broken down, and dispersed through black markets around the world. Somewhere, wealthy people unknowingly wear diamonds that were once stolen by the Pink Panthers. The question of whether the Panthers could exist today is debatable. Modern security, surveillance, and international cooperation make their style of operation much more difficult. But the fundamental factors that created them, economic inequality, skilled people without opportunities, and valuable targets, still exist. What we know for certain is that the Pink Panthers achieved something remarkable, even if it was illegal. They operated at the highest level of their criminal profession, executed hundreds of complex operations across the globe, and evaded capture for years despite international manhunts. Their story is a testament to human capability, for better or worse. The final irony is that most Panthers didn't get to enjoy their stolen wealth. Those caught lost everything to asset seizures and legal fees. Those who escaped lived in fear and isolation. The few who successfully retired often found that the money couldn't buy happiness or erase the psychological toll of years of crime and stress. In the end, the Pink Panthers represent a unique moment in criminal history. They were the right people with the right skills at the right time, operating in a window between old security systems and new technology. That window has now largely closed. There will likely never be another criminal organization quite like them. Their story serves as both warning and fascination, a warning about the consequences of choosing crime, no matter how skilled you are, and a fascination with human audacity, cleverness, and the eternal question of how far people will go to change their circumstances. The Pink Panthers stole $500 million in jewels across 35 countries, but what they really stole was something less tangible, a sense of security. They showed that nothing is truly safe, that every system has weaknesses, and that determined people can achieve almost anything, even if only temporarily. That legacy continues today. Every time someone walks into a luxury jewellery store and sees the reinforced glass, armed guards, and sophisticated alarms, they're looking at the world the Pink Panthers created. A world more secure, but also more aware of how vulnerable we really are. The Pink Panthers are mostly gone now, faded into prison cells, obscurity, or death. But their legend lives on, a modern crime story that captured the imagination of the world and changed how we think about security, crime, and the incredible things humans can accomplish when they combine skill, daring, and desperation.